I guess good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 9 o'clock. We better get started in order to get things done today. Again, good morning. As a vice chairman of this committee for affordability, accounting, and planning, I've been asked to step as committee's chair today. Dr. David Tezer, who was ably chaired this committee for almost 2 years, resigned to accept a federal government appointment which precludes him from serving out the last few months of his term. We wish him well on his new endeavor and thank for many years of service to this committee and board. During the time the chair position is vacant, I will serve as an acting chair until a new one is appointed. I want to personally tell you that I was very impressed with Dr. Dr. Treasure. He was very knowledgeable about Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Everything you can ask him, he knows on the tip of his fingers. Anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Annie Jones McClellan, who was appointed by the board by Governor Abbott as an outstanding student representative for one-year term effective June 1. Annie is pursuing a law degree and a master's degree in public affairs from the University of Texas in Austin. She received a bachelor's degree in German studies from Dartmouth College and master's degree in politics and distinction from the University of Essex in United Kingdom. She has worked in multiple tasks, executive branch agencies during the legislative sessions of Texas legislature. Her higher education related experience include researching for university strategic planning division, checking the Office of General Counsel at the University of Texas System, and interning in the Senate Higher Education Committee in the Texas Legislature. We welcome Annie. Would you like to say a few words, Annie?
So I'd like to say first, thanks very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really excited. I wanted to acknowledge Haley, my predecessor in this position. She's been very helpful. I've had conversation with her, and she's been great about explaining what this role involves, and I know that she was a big presence here. I also would like to say thank you to the Governor's Appointment Office. They were great to work with. I've really enjoyed getting to know the coordinating board staff and the members of the board here as well. I also owe a special thank you to Fred Frias, who has been incredibly helpful over the last few months. I would not be here without him and his guidance. I really have appreciated your help. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of the people who are supporting here, and I'm looking forward to a great year that will be student-centered and that will mark progress towards the 60 by 30 text goals, and that will increase workforce participation in the pathways to the workforce and from K through 12, and I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with your credentials, though. Agenda item 2 is consideration of approval of the minutes from the March 29, 2017 committee meeting. Any discussions, any questions?
Second.
Motion is passed. We come to agenda item number 3 is consideration of approval of consent calendar. The consent calendar include non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. Highlighted items in gray are the consent items on the agenda. The following consent calendar for considerations are agenda item 5G, 5K2. At this time, I would like to add 5H and 5I. Are there any agenda items that that anyone who wants to move or remove from the consent calendar? No? Is there any discussion? No?
I'll make a motion.
Approved, thank you. Agenda item number 4, public testimony on agenda item relating to this committee, affordability, accounting, and plan. We don't have any public testimony. I guess we move on to item 5A. Item 5A is consideration of adopting Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the approval of the revised measures for the Texas Higher Education Accountability System. Dr. Julie Eklund, Commissioner of Strategic Planning and Funding, will provide a presentation on the process to update the measure and present the Commissioner's recommendation for final approvers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar. Good morning. I will be presenting to you today on the updated accountability system measures, and today is actually the time when we're going to be bringing these to you for your approval. We've had presentations throughout the past year about the fact that we have been working on updating our measures to align with our 60 by 30 TEX plan, and you all received as a supplemental item a copy of those measures for our higher education sectors, our public higher education sectors. The accountability system is a critical tool for communicating with stakeholders across the state about how our higher education institutions are performing. The system was first developed in response to an executive order from then Governor Perry, and the 2004 order charged the agency with creating a comprehensive system of accountability to provide the citizens of Texas, the governor, and the legislature with the information necessary to determine the effectiveness and quality of the education students receive at individual institutions of higher education. The system is also designed to enable stakeholders to evaluate and compare institutional outcomes for the purposes of a continuous institutional improvement. This system is primarily for public institutions. It's been since 2004 for those publics. The community colleges joined voluntarily in 2005, but we do have some data for our career schools, our 2- and 4-year for-profit career schools included in the system. They joined in 2011. We do not include our independent colleges and universities in Texas in terms of individual student data, but we do include some limited data for them related to our plan goals and targets. As you know, we revised the interface of the accountability system this year, and we were happy to demonstrate that for you at our April board meeting. Obviously, one reason we did that was because we have a new plan, but today we're going to focus on the accountability measure update. There were a couple of main reasons for this. One, to align the measures to the plan, and also to reduce the number of measures. So to focus on our 60 by 30 text priorities and to enhance our stakeholder understanding, we have chosen to present fewer measures, and we worked hard with our accountability groups at our institutions to streamline the measures. As you can see here, our university measures were decreased by almost half. Our measures for 2-year colleges were reduced, and for our health-related institutions, or HRIs. Our measure modifications for the 2-year and 4-year career schools have not yet been completed, but those are under development. We'll be bringing those to you later in the year. Really, we are trying to get back to our roots here. We had added some measures to our old system over the years, and we really wanted to get back to really focusing on those measures that are most important for the state. We didn't want to dilute them, so I think our institutions and working with us have done a good job at really focusing on what's most important. Okay, we've spent a lot of time talking with you about the process for reviewing and updating the measures. We have really gone through many steps to engage institutions, the board, and other stakeholders in this process. But today we are nearing the end of the process. We'll be presenting this to you today, and then we will bring the measures to the full board for approval in July. Here's just a reminder of the new interface, which we which we shared with you in April. We have 5 categories of measures. In terms of how it's organized, we have our 4 goals for the plan: the 60 by 30 text educated population measure, completion, marketable skills, student debt, and then we have an area for sector-specific measures. In terms of our 60 by 30 text educated population measure, this is a statewide measure. Yes?
Sorry, the monitors aren't working.
Oh, monitor, yes, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. I guess we'll, if you,
We do have the.
yes, you have the PowerPoint. Yes, thank you. And I think they are working out in the.
Everywhere but for you.
Everywhere but here, yes. So it might be new for you to see that we're calling our 60 by 30 goal our educated population goal. We had some confusion in terms of how folks were interpreting this goal when we referred to it as our attainment goal. It has to do with our 25 to 30-year-old population who have achieved a degree or credential in the state, but some folks were confusing it in the field with our completion goal. So we thought calling it our educated population goal because it really does focus on having 60% of our population with that post-secondary degree or credential. We thought added some clarity. So you'll see it referred to throughout our presentations today as our 60 by 30 educated population goal. So in terms of that, again, we look at that statewide. We gather information from the Census Bureau's American Community Surveys, and it looks at all residents of the state that survey does, both in terms of those who are educated in Texas and those who migrated into the state with credentials from other places. Unlike the educated population goal, the completion goal specifically counts the production of credentials from Texas institutions of higher education, and we count the number of certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees awarded by individual institutions. Of course, the goal is to get to 550,000 awarded in 2030. And you can see here we have our targets under this goal shown, but you'll also see in italics some additional measures, and those are provided to provide more context for our measures. They also examine areas such as institutional grad rates, persistence rates, the success of students who enter higher education underprepared. So we do have some additional contextual measures included. Examples of our marketable skills measures include the percent of students found working enrolled within 1 year after completion, and also the rates of certification and licensure. Sample student debt measures report the amount of debt and proportion of students with debt, as well as information about excess semester credit hours and hours completed versus attempted. Much of the focus during the final stages of this process was on the methodologies. Our institutions came in this spring, and we really looked very carefully at the methodologies. We also thought it was helpful to institutions to see the data posted in our accountability system. We had a soft launch, and they were able to look at the actual data affiliated with the measures online, and we did get some questions about how things were calculated once they were able to see that detail. So we had final meetings in April. We sent out the measures to institutional leadership around the state in May for any final comments, and we're again bringing you our final proposed measures today. So as I mentioned earlier, you do have a spreadsheet with the measures, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Eklund. Any questions? Any discussions? I need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Motion approved.
Can I make a brief comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Julie and Jenna and Bill Abasola and the rest of the staff. They make this seem so easy, and it's really a great challenge, and the institutions have actually worked very well with them. So I think this is really, we're getting great feedback from this, but it involved a lot of work you'll fortunately never see. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much for all the help you guys provide to this committee. Agenda item 5B, consideration of adopting Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the approval of 60 by 30 progress report. Dr. Julie Eklund and Mr. John White.
Thank you very much. Well, this is the second installment of what will be yearly 60 by 30 text progress reports that we will be bringing to the committee and the board during our June and July meetings. The report provides update on data, and we're going to be giving you our first year of data results in terms of progress on the plan today, and we're also going to be talking about activities that have occurred since we last presented to you. You may recall that we had a report due to the legislature in December, so that we provided a report in October, but we're now going to get into a regular yearly cycle of bringing this report to you at the summer meetings. Okay, so this slide shows the baseline data that we shared with you in October, and so we're going to move from here, and I'm going to walk you through the progress that we've made. I do want to point out that although the baseline is generally fiscal year 15 data, we do have some data where we have a lag. For example, that American Communities surveys data we have about students with, about members of the citizenship with degrees and certificates. We get that about a year late. So we do, in a couple of cases, show you data for an earlier year, but we will, as we move forward, be looking year to year as part of the progress report. So Texas is making progress towards our 60 by 30 educated population goal. You can see where we've jumped about 0.7 percentage points in terms of those students who have certificates, associates, bachelors, and masters. I should say those members of our population who have certificates, associates, bachelors, and masters. And again, these are our 25 to 34-year-olds across Texas, including those who have come into the state with degrees and certificates. We really need to be progressing at about 1.3 percentage points a year if we're going to reach that 60% by 2030. So this is a very ambitious goal. We have progress to make there. In terms of the completion goal, our completions are growing. We had actually a 7.7% increase in our associate degree completions from 2015 to 2016. As we generally see, our bachelor's degrees do make up the largest component of completions, and in terms of certificates and master's degrees, we added about 1,000 in each category. So as you can see, we're making progress, but we still have a ways to go there. In terms of Hispanic, I'm one step ahead. In terms of our completions by Hispanic students, we saw a 7.5% increase. So we are doing well there, but that's our population that's growing the fastest in Texas. So we really need to continue to accelerate in this area. We saw growth in all the undergraduate degrees for Hispanic students, for our certificates, associate degrees, and bachelor's degrees, but we saw a drop in the master's completion for this group. Our completions by African American students are actually down from 2015, and this is concerning to us. We did take a little bit of a deeper dive. We were down about 151 completions, which is 0.4%, and we looked at the gender differences for this drop, and it was primarily for our female African American students. So we had a drop of 141 for females and 10 for males. So generally, our female African American students have completed at strong rates. We are seeing a slowdown here, and so I think that's an area we certainly need to focus on. And particularly for African American males, that's a group that has completed at some of our lowest rates statewide, and so we certainly want to see an uptick there. So we will spend some time looking more carefully at that data, trying to understand what's happening and really think about strategies for improving that outcome. In terms of our target to increase our male share of our completions and overall to increase completions by our male students, we did make a small amount of progress. About the share of males increased by about 0.2 percentage points. This is moving in the right direction, but we actually need to do more because males are still earning only about 42.5% of our completions versus females. Okay, and one thing we have talked about is we do see some gender discrepancies that are interesting in terms of our STEM fields, where we actually see a much higher percentage of males completing there than females. So we understand that in terms of gender, it's complicated. There's a lot of things to look at, and we're really trying to better understand that and improve completions across the board. In terms of our economically disadvantaged students, we just track this for undergraduates because we base our definition of economically disadvantaged on students who have received a Pell Grant. So we don't track students with a master's. We did see an increase of 4.7% in this population. That was slower than the increase we saw from 14 to 15, so our 15 to 16 slowed. But really, in the long run, increasing these attainments is going to help reduce the numbers of economically disadvantaged students in Texas, which is going to be a positive thing for the state. In terms of our percent of students who go on directly from public high school into higher education, we really need to do some work here. We've seen a drop in the percent of students the last few years who are going on. There are some things we're going to look at more carefully here. For example, we are going to take a look at students who complete a certificate or degree while in high school. It's still a pretty small number, but that's something that we want to look at and consider how those students might be included or at least discussed as part of this target. But this is something that's very important because our students who enroll directly from high school tend to persist and complete at higher rates than other groups. In terms of our marketable skills goal, this is an area where I think we need more staff effort in terms of our measurement and expectations around this goal. But we did ask institutions to let us know what they're doing through our accountability system comment portal, and we did see pockets of activities related to this area, and we've included some of those here. In terms of graduates working or enrolled, we have one target related to under the marketable skills goal here, and we're right about at the 80% that we're striving to maintain. In terms of our student debt goal, our debt levels in relation to first-year wages are at about where we prescribed them in the plan. We were actually at 59.5%, just a bit below our target ceiling. But what I think is interesting here is you see the largest, this is I think, a helpful graphic. It can take a little while to sort of understand what's going on here, but you can see that we've got our median at 60%, but you can see in Texas, the largest number of students, about 6,700, fall at that 20% debt to first year wage point. Some of that, I think, could be that because our community colleges are some of the most affordable in the country. Our students at two-year colleges tend to be very low in terms of debt to first year wage, but it's at both the community colleges and the universities. It's nice to know that we do have many students who are below that 50%, that 60% point. And we also track the percent of students who graduate with debt, and this has actually decreased slightly by about 1%. We think this is a positive thing. We do want to make sure students are borrowing if they do need to, but we're in a good place in terms of that, I think, related to the planned target. In terms of excess semester credit hours attempted while completing a degree, we've actually seen a large drop there at the associate degree level. Our community colleges are doing a good job. I think we have success points. There are a lot of guided pathways efforts. There's a lot of activities going on around trying to help students reduce the number of excess, or to help students and statewide to reduce the number of excess hours earned towards a degree. So the bachelor's degree excess hours did remain steady from 15 to 16, but that's an area where we've seen drops in earlier years. Obviously, we have a long way to go. Our goal is to be at 12 excess hours statewide in 2020.
Julie, and I have a really quick question.
3 in 2030, 12 in 2020, and then in 2030 we need to get down to 3, yes. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did you see any correlation there in terms of your comment relating to the community colleges doing a really good job? Is there any kind of correlation to the increase in articulation agreements, and that kind of effort between community colleges and four-year universities?
Well, when we look at time to degrees for the associate degree, those are our students we track those students who are completing associates and look at how many hours they've completed. So for the bachelor's degree rate, what's been interesting, and I think we've shared this with you, is students who transfer, whether it's from a 2-year to a 4-year or a 4-year to a 4-year, have a much higher number of excess hours than students who start at an institution at a 4-year and complete a bachelor's degree there. And that's something that we recently discovered and diving more deeply into our transfer data during the legislative session, and we're going to look at that and try to get an understanding there. But I would hope that if we're dropping the number of excess hours for students who earn associate degrees, this big drop we saw this year, that will play out when, for those students who do transfer, I hope that in a few years when we start to see them graduating from universities, that we will see that drop as well. So you're absolutely correct. Over time, I think we will anticipate seeing improvements in the university rates because we've seen this big drop at the community colleges.
We should have a focused presentation on that at a future meeting, because there's a lot of additional information Julie's discovered, such as when you're talking about the hours at transfer, there are people include the hours that the students made D's or F's, and those would never transfer. And so we still have more hours that aren't transferring efficiently, but it's fewer than it appears because of the courses that wouldn't transfer to really to any other school, or even into the school from which they're coming if somebody else had a similar grade.
Great, thank you.
It's not the majority, but it affects the numbers.
Yes, thank you. Definitely we're moving in the right direction there, but we need to keep going. And then this is just a summary of what I've just presented in terms of our overall progress on our goals and our targets. Wanted to put that together for you all in one place. And here I have highlighted those two areas that I emphasized during the presentation, our African American completions and our public high school grads who are enrolling in Texas higher education. And those are areas where I think we really need to focus on improvement. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the report or my presentation.
Yeah, I've got a question. So the high school, the rate from, with students from high school going on to, either a community college or a bachelor is declining.
Yes.
And yet, in this long report, you have all these different programs that, are trying to encourage students, the high school students, to go to college.
Yes. So
is it not working?
Well, we're just beginning this plan, and so this is a new area that we're focusing on. We do know that we saw some interesting patterns with this statistic during the recession. We really thought we're moving in a great direction. We were up to, I think, about 56% enrolling directly, but then we started to see drops there. I think there's a couple of things we've thought about related to that. For one example that I mentioned, we don't include those students who've already completed, and I think we're seeing growing numbers of students who complete a certificate or associate while they're in high school, so we want to look at that. We also have seen a big increase in the high school graduation rates, so more students are graduating from our public high schools. And I did want to add that although the percentage is down, the actual numbers of students going on to higher ed has gone up. We're not keeping up with the population, but we are seeing an increase numerically. So we have a lot of things to look at.
So in general, if the economy is better, people choose to get jobs, high school students that graduate, rather than go to...
Not necessarily, but we did see some interesting patterns there, so we need to try to understand that better, but we have seen, yeah.
Chairman.
It's too soon to know what the impact of House Bill 5 that was passed a couple of sessions ago will be, but there's some reason to believe that will change college-going patterns. We also don't have data on, I'm waiting for them to stop talking. So do we have data on the percentage of students who go from Texas public high schools to college out of state?
Yes, and that was presented at the last meeting, the National Student Clearinghouse data. We had heard rumors that those numbers had gone up as the high school populations are dropping in other states, but it's actually been consistent over time. About 10% of those who go on to college go out of state, about 5% of the total graduating class. We don't track this as part of our plan. We think it's important. We don't know if we'll always have that data, for one, and we also think it's very important to keep track of the students who are staying in Texas, but we will, when we have it available, track those rates and try to get a sense of if there's some change going on there. I also wanted to mention that another change that may have impacted these numbers is that the Texas Education Agency, since the last legislative session, so the 84th legislative session, has been allowed to graduate students who didn't meet the passing standards, the graduation standards on the high school graduation test. They can pass those students by committee if a committee agrees that someone should be allowed to graduate. And we were actually asked to run some data for that for legislators during this 85th session, and we discovered that only about 20% of those students who had been graduated by committee actually enrolled directly in higher education. So that could also be part of the reason why we've seen a slight drop in terms of the high school to college rates.
Dr. Eklund, I got a question. Right now, our graduate rate is 0.7% increasing. We need 1.3% to reach the goal of 60 by 30.
In terms of our educated population, absolutely, yes.
So do you have any specific plans how, or do you have, or anybody?
Well, this might be a good time to let John talk about some of the activities that have been occurring around the state related to our goals, and also Dr. Jenna Cullinane-Heggie is going to be presenting after this on setting regional targets, and some of that going to be related to our 60 by 30
If
goal.
I can make one brief comment before John does that, is as with closing the gaps, we have targets incrementally every 5 years, and the understanding is part of the first 5 years is ramping up with new strategies, and we expect that those things we put in place the progress will accelerate after the first few years. And so you'll notice our targets are much more aggressive at 10 years than they are at 5 years, and because you're essentially changing a system with 1.5 million students.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, so before you start, I'm a little embarrassed. Could you just give a quick Cliff Notes version of House Bill 5 and what that is?
So House Bill 5, there is no Cliff Notes version, but it changed the high school graduation curriculum. And so previously there had been the 4x4, which is a specific curriculum for demonstrating college and career readiness in high school. And that was replaced with a different structure whereby students choose basically a specialization that has... yeah, exactly. And then they have specific requirements within that that they have to meet. And not all of those pathways are necessarily career and college readiness based. I believe the first graduating class to have enrolled under House Bill 5 will be next year. Is that correct? So that's why, as the commissioner said, we don't entirely know the impact yet, because those students who have still been working their way out under the old system have not completely worked their way out yet.
Maybe the easiest way to explain the major change was before House Bill 5 passed, students were automatically enrolled in a college prep curriculum. If they didn't want to do that, they had to opt out. With the creation of this endorsement system, students now have to opt in to take a college-ready curriculum. And there are a lot of data that suggest students are much more likely to be college-ready if they have to opt out than if they have to opt in. And we haven't seen what the results of House Bill 5 can be. They might be very positive in some ways. We might have more students graduating from high school ready to go to work with training and career and technical education fields. We don't know yet, but we're monitoring that very carefully.
Great. So I'm going to present an overview of particularly some of the outreach and communications efforts in regards to 60 by 30 TX. The first item here is 60 by 30 TX is obviously now our official logo and brand. It's really the foundation of our identity as an agency. So the logo is incorporated into all of our communications materials. That includes overviews, PowerPoints, any presentation we make to a stakeholder group, to the legislature, all of our media engagement from press releases to social media. All of it includes the 60 by 30 logo as part of our identity. And the intent is to make sure that for us, as well as those we engage with, 60 by 30 TX is at the top of their minds. And one place where you really saw an impact of this was during the legislative session. During the legislative session, 60 by 30 TX really was at the core of all of our communication with the legislature, whether we were presenting on our recommendations, providing analysis of higher education bills that came from any place. We always provided our input in the context of 60 by 30 TX. And what you saw was many legislators really took 60 by 30 as their foundation for discussing higher education, so that Chairman Seliger, Chairman Lozano, Chairman Zerwas, Chairman Nelson, when discussing higher education, it really was predicated on, is this going to help us meet our 60 by 30 TX goals? And you saw that in committee meetings. You saw that on several floor exchanges. There was a particular exchange where Representative Clardy took to the floor in opposition to an amendment that would have defunded a financial aid program and asked, is my colleague familiar with the 60 by 30 TX plan and why it's so important that we meet these goals in Texas? And so that, I gave him a little cheer from the gallery when he did that. Maybe the biggest thing we've done this year in terms of increasing the visibility of the plan has been through the launch of the 60by30tx.com website. This website was funded by a grant from the Gates Foundation. We had a soft launch in April that had nearly 3,000 visitors, and then our official launch in May. We provided media releases to 15,000 reporters. We emailed participants from our 60 by 30 Texas workshops to make sure they were aware. The importance of the website is that it provides a way for stakeholders, whether they be legislators, people at institutions, parents, students, whoever, to engage with the plan at a level that they're comfortable with. So if you want to just have a broad picture of where's the state in terms of our 4 goals for 60 by 30 TX, you can get that very easily off the website. If you want to know what the 3-, 4-, and 6-year graduation rates are at Tyler Junior College, you can get that from the website. So really you can dive down to whatever level of detail is going to be useful for you, and you can do that at an institutional level, at a statewide level, at a regional level. So really it provides a lot of very helpful information for a wide variety of stakeholders. We actually were very lucky, well, not lucky, it was through the work of Kelly Carper Polden, but the Texas Tribune gave us a free 60-day campaign in May and June to push awareness of 60by30tx.com. And that's about a $16,000 value that we got for free. And during that, just during May, there were about 104,000 impressions, so people who looked at that material on the Texas Tribune website. During this past interim, we had a number of meetings and events to not just promote the plan, but particularly to engage stakeholders in the plan, make sure they're aware of it, but also making sure that they're buying into it and making it a part of their actions. We had workshops in 8 regions during the last interim. We are, now that the session's over, currently trying to figure out what our regional workshop schedule will be for the coming interim. The commissioner and board members presented at boards of regents and boards of trustee meetings regarding the plan. We've presented at a number of additional state and national meetings. The commissioner will be attending the 2017 State Higher Education Executive Officers Meeting, where he will be discussing the plan and its impact in Texas. And then, of course, 60 by 30 TX was a pretty integral part of the tri-agency meetings and the tri-agency report that Governor Abbott announced last fall. In terms of media, 60 by 30 TX has been highlighted in a number of venues. It was highlighted in the 2017 Texas Economic Development Guide. We had 88 specific 60 by 30 TX specific coverages in major media outlets across Texas and the U.S. And there were more than 177 mentions of the plan across a range of media. And finally, I just want to highlight some local adoption efforts. The key to 60 by 30 really taking off is having local and regional stakeholders take ownership of the plan and really make sure that their institutions and their regions are making the decisions and taking the actions that are necessary to achieve the goals locally. El Paso has frankly been one of our biggest cheerleaders when it comes to 60 by 30 TX, which is, I guess, not surprising considering that the head of the strategic planning committee is from the region. But they actually, in January, the Council on Regional Economic Expansion and Education Development in El Paso launched a strategic plan specific to the region, and that we actually believe David was there for the announcement of that. We also had in Northeast Texas, several regional institutions have launched 60by30netx.com, which is designed to increase awareness of the impact and the need for 60 by 30 in the Northeast Texas region, as well as to provide resources for industry, for institutions, for parents and students regarding how they can help achieve the goals of the plan. And finally, an important element of 60 by 30 TX is the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate degree. It checks all 4 goals of 60 by 30. It's based on marketable skills. By keeping prices low, it helps reduce student debt, and it obviously contributes to attainment and completion. We were able to announce in March that whereas there had previously been 2 baccalaureate programs approved through that we announced 4 additional baccalaureate programs that will be offering low-cost degrees in Texas. And those programs are, make sure I get this. So they will include a baccalaureate of science in mechanical engineering at Texas A&M Corpus, a Bachelor of Science in Applied Science at Tarleton State, a BS in Criminal Justice at Texas A&M Commerce, and a Baccalaureate of Applied Technology and Computer Information at South Texas College in partnership with Austin Community College. So our hope is to continue to grow the Affordable Baccalaureate program so that more of these low-cost baccalaureate degrees will be available to Texas students. And that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And John, I did just want to take a brief minute to thank Ramona Reeves, who is our writer-editor. We had folks from around the agency contributing to this progress report, and she took all those pieces, did a lot of writing herself, and put it together as part of the report. So I did want to.
Ramona is a master of weaving together.
Yes, so I did want to thank her for her efforts.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question to Mr. Wyatt? Yeah. Mr. Wyatt, I'd like to see if it's possible that maybe we can get updates to the Board of Trustees and Board of Regents on our updates yearly. I get questions from some of the regents and trustees of how we're doing with a 60 by 30 TX. So even if we were able to get a short presentation, I think the schedule this past year has been excellent, but I think people would like an update. And so I think as we have an update, that's just a recommendation.
Well, and I should have clarified, our plan is to continue to present to boards of regents and boards of trustees, and also obviously to continue our having the chancellors come to our board meetings as well to present so that we can have that discussion.
Also, our regents meeting in November, we'll do it. So we'll do it in multiple venues, but I think Julie just suggested that we can send them a copy of this report as well.
And we have a presentation scheduled with the UT Board, the Texas A&M Board, and the Texas State Board. And we're working on the others as well.
Yes, excellent, because we do, I mean, I get some questions on that, so I think it's important as far as engaging them, letting them know what we're doing, because this is obviously our big initiative, and they need to be informed as well, so thank you.
Well, we better move on, but I've got one question for Dr. Eklund. You said the African American graduation rate dropped by 0.4%, especially in the female, and you know, what's the reason behind it? Do you know any reason why?
You know, we're going to have to look more carefully at that and see what we can find out and work with our College Readiness Success Division and our Academic Quality and Workforce Division to see if it's a slowdown in terms of the students enrolling, or maybe it's that students aren't completing at the levels they were in the past. So we're going to dive more deeply into that and see what we can learn.
There's also the broader demographic issue. That what's the growth rate? Not just who's graduating from high school, but what's the percentage of students in high school? And there are some very recent new demographic data that we need to look at more carefully and understand that. But it's definitely a concern. And I did hear a report on NPR that actually the Asian American population was growing at a higher percentage than any other population. I need to look at that and verify that, because that's the first
Correct.
I've seen of that. So it's a constantly evolving, and it's important that you ask these questions because we need to understand this better every day.
Thank you, Dr. Eklund and Dr. Gardner. Any other questions? I need a motion and a second, please.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Item 5B is approved. We move to item 5C, is presentation of setting a regional target for selected statewide 60 by 30 goals. Dr. Jenna Hedge, Deputy Assistant Commissioner on Strategic Planning and Funding, will provide a brief description and is available for question. The presentation will include strategy, timeline for developing regional and institutional target. The item is only for information.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Today I'm going to present our approach for establishing regional targets for 60 by 30 techs. Through this approach, we aim to foster shared ownership with regions and institutions in the state and help translate our big goals into coordinated action. As Julie alluded to, the average annual rate of growth needed to reach the 60 by 30 educated population goal exceeds the highest rates of growth we have seen in any year so far this millennium. The ambitious goals we've laid out in the state strategic plan will not be met by the agency or any one entity in the higher education ecosystem alone. The agency has led the work of identifying and setting state goals and supports their achievement through its policy, data, programmatic, and coordination efforts. Many other stakeholders will need to continue or enhance their coordinated efforts, including those of legislature and governor, K-12 partners and communities, and workforce partners. Institutions of higher education certainly play a significant role, as do nonprofit organizations, associations, vendors, researchers, and philanthropic partners. Many in the ecosystem have adopted the language of 60 by 30 techs and begun new efforts or deepened existing work to support the plan, although we have much work to do to dramatically improve student outcomes. By breaking selected goals down to a regional level, institutions and other stakeholders will have a clearer signal about their contributions to statewide goals. The regional approach is a response to input from the field. Institutions have asked the coordinating board for guidance about how many certificates and degrees they should be producing by 2030. The approach also builds on the success of the regional workshops that John just mentioned to help disseminate and engage people about strategies to reach our goals. And we also know that some regions have begun organizing a broad set of stakeholders around 60 by 30 techs that John mentioned again, the El Paso and Northeast Texas work. These homegrown efforts are very encouraging, and we'd like to nudge more regions to undertake this kind of transparent articulation of their student success goals. So why focus on regions? Setting regional targets is a compelling strategy for several reasons. The first is that one size does not fit all. Our 10 higher education regions that you can see here on the presentation have different population growth, they have different demographics, and they're home to different labor markets. And when it comes to the 60 by 30 techs goals, they're really starting in very different places. And institutions within those regions also differ dramatically by mission, funding, selectivity, student population, just to name a few. We also know from analysis of state data that students are very mobile, though predominantly they stay within their region. On average, 80% of Texas students enroll within their region where they attend high school. This trend also applies not only to high school to college matriculation, but in the transfer patterns we see among higher education institutions. We also believe that regional target setting can improve the effectiveness of institutional target setting. Working in cooperation with other institutions and regional stakeholders knowledgeable about their local context, colleges and universities can consider factors outside of their single institutional context. The first step in the process that we're proposing is that coordinating board staff will replicate the methodology that produced our 60 by 30 text goals with data on regional population and migration, enrollment, and completion patterns. We'll establish regional targets in 3 areas. The first is the 60 by 30 educated population goal. The second is the completion goal of 550,000 certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees. And the third is the target of 65% of high school graduates enrolling directly in higher education by 2030. In the next step, the higher education regions will be asked to bring together institutions and stakeholders to identify at least one powerful strategy in each of the 3 aforementioned areas. We will also ask them to set numerical targets by institution for the completion goal in 2020, 2025, and 2030. While all of the goals and targets of the strategic plan are critical for the future of Texas, the 3 aforementioned areas are particularly well suited for regional work. Stakeholders have reported that it can be challenging to wrap their minds around this 60% attainment goal and how to approach progress. Individual contributions here are not obvious. In addition, neither the 60 by 30 goal nor the target for high school to higher education enrollment can be measured at an institutional level. In effect, everyone is responsible for these statewide goals, but as they say, when everyone is responsible, no one is responsible. The hope of the regional approach is to foster clear ownership in these areas, and in particular to engage not only higher education institutions, but to empower workforce and K-12 partners, community leaders, and the broader higher education ecosystem that I mentioned at the start to help meet our state objectives. Although the completion goal is easy to monitor, we've included it here because regional context can really help improve institutional planning. Regional target setting encourages the tactical planning that must be done to reach statewide goals, but is impractical to do at a statewide level. For example, in some regions, the completion goal and targets can best be met by increasing level 1 and level 2 certificates that match labor market demand. And in other regions, the focus may be more on bachelor's and master's level degrees that fit the needs of the workforce and mix of institutions in that particular location. We believe the benefits of the approach are many. Regional target setting sends a clear signal about state priorities, but at the same time benefits from local knowledge. It fosters local creativity because it's not overly prescriptive about institutional activity. It also avoids the pitfalls of institution-only targets that can catalyze competition in ways that may not benefit the state. For example, enrollment increases at one institution may result in decreases at a neighboring institution, leading to a net zero impact on the state. Another benefit of the approach is apparent when we consider a single institution with an enrollment cap. Faced with an individual target only, the contributions of this type of institution to increasing completion are somewhat limited to increasing its own graduation rate. When we consider a regional approach, this institution might collaborate with others to improve their transfer pathways or share best practices. The regional approach will demand cooperation and broad participation in a field where competition is more often the norm. It will also require a commitment to our shared responsibility for students outside of a single institution. The coordinating board will need to help nurture this commitment. Finally, here you can see our development timeline, which includes time for agency staff to finalize numbers for regional targets in the 3 aforementioned areas. At the July board meeting, we will seek approval for the regional target setting process and share proposed numerical targets. By the start of the fall semester, we'll be ready to release regional targets and provide supporting materials to aid decision-making and regional collaboration, and staff will be available for virtual or in-person support for regions during this time. With that, I'll conclude and welcome any questions or comments you have.
Thank you, Dr. Hagee. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did, although it's Cullinane Hagee, one of those combo
sorry.
names.
Okay. Anyway, anybody has questions? We move on to agenda item 5D. Is a report on facilities project that were submitted to the coordinating board. Dr. Julie Ackland, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, is available to answer any question. This item is only for information. Anybody?
Question, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Eklund, when it says that their space need no, is
Yes.
that a major issue?
No, as you can see in the footnotes, we often have this situation where there's net assignable square feet of unfinished space, and once it's completed, we believe, based on our analysis, that the project will meet the building efficiency standard. This is probably the most common reason we see when the standard isn't met for building efficiency. It's that we don't have the information yet because that square footage has not yet been assigned. So in this case, we're not concerned because we believe it will eventually meet this standard.
Space usage, like the one at Texas A&M Commerce?
Oh, I'm sorry, and that's for the Texas A&M Commerce for the efficiency.
What's Texas A&M?
Oh, and I apologize for that. I'm going to see if staff is here today. Tom Keaton is actually not in the building today. Do we have Roland? We'll get you an answer for that.
I'm just curious because it had no by it. I was wondering.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I realize that, and we will get you the additional
Thank you.
answer to that question.
Any other question?
I do have one quick question.
Sure.
The date of these projects, can you give me a time frame? You see these reports.
We could provide you the time frame for each project. They are submitted to us, and I think the time frames vary in terms of when the institutions expect them to be completed. We're seeing a lot come through now that are funded through the TRBs that went through in the last legislative session. But we'd be happy to provide you with the time frame for each.
Thank you, Dr. Eklund, and also thank you for explaining me the ratio of net assignable square feet to gross.
We're learning together, Mr. Anwar.
We move on to agenda item 5E, which is consideration of adopting Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the approval of nominated members of Formula Funding Advisory Committee for 2020 to 21 by naming Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, will be available to answer any questions.
Yes, and we did provide you with the list of nominees in your materials.
You have any questions or discussion? I need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
Motion passed. It's approved. Agenda item number 5F, I'm sorry, is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the approval of energy saving performance contract for Prairie View A&M University. This has been a change. Who is representing the Prairie View this morning? Dr. Cynthia A. Carter, Associate Vice President for Business and Service Planning. Prairie View A&M University will give a brief presentation, joining her by Mr. Billy Accord and with Mr. Emerso. The both will be available to answer questions. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Funding, will be available to answer regarding the process.
Yes,
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, and I'm just going to give a brief background for the board. Good morning. Prairie View A&M has requested approval for an energy savings performance contract, and a copy of the staff's analysis is in your agenda materials. This project will increase energy efficiency, modernize aged equipment, and serve to recapitalize infrastructure assets. And as you can see from the briefing sheet, the project will be funded through a low-interest loan program. Staff has reviewed all the contract materials and recommends approval. But as you may recall, the board recently approved a rule change delegating approval to either the Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, this committee, or to the full board. And so this particular project is subject to the final approval of this committee. And so I just wanted to remind you of that process. We went through it at earlier meetings, and the matrix is provided in your materials in terms of who is delegated authority. So here today, again, from Prairie View, we're very happy to welcome I'm sorry, and I think we didn't get our names changed here, but we're very happy to welcome you to present information, Dr. Carter and Mr. McCord, on this project.
Thank you. Good morning, and greetings from Prairie View A&M University. I'm sitting here this morning on behalf of Corey Bradford, who is our CFO. I wanted to speak with you a little bit about the process of how we went through this project to select Amoresco and where we are today. We conducted our preliminary utility audit in the summer of 2015, where we brought in 4 different vendors, giving them an opportunity to make presentations. We went through the process and narrowed that down to 2 more individuals, and then made our final selection to go with Amoresco based on what they provided to us. So within the investment grade audit that was completed, they went through a series of exercises to determine those things on our campus that needed attention. We were founded in 1876. A lot of the facilities that are on campus, while many of them are new, we still have some issues with aging infrastructure and things that need to be at a more energy efficient standard. And so when we went through, there were 31 facilities on campus that was identified in this, and we also included our 2 off-campus centers, meaning our College of Nursing in Houston as well as our Northwest Houston Center in Cypress. As we went through the process, we identified the energy-saving measures, which would include items such as interior lighting retrofits, exterior lighting, also doing some metering implementation and controls, demand response, and working with San Bernard Electric Cooperative, who is our provider at Prairie View, and doing some things within our central utility plant. As was mentioned earlier, we are pursuing funding through QECB, which is going to allow for a lower interest rate with a longer payback. We know that some of the things that will be touched, as I touched on earlier, for the chilled water system cooling towers and things within our central utility plant, we were going to have to touch those at some point, but going through this program, again, allows us to take care of that at a lower interest rate. We prepared everything that was necessary to submit it to our A&M System Board of Regents, and they reviewed that program, all the materials in April, and they approved this to move forward. So going forward with this program allows us to have 3 major accomplishments: to reduce energy consumption, to replace capital items that are in poor condition, and address key comfort and lighting systems within our facilities for all of our visitors, all of our constituency, and to create a safer environment through the lighting and other measures that we're doing on campus. At this point, I'll ask for any questions.
Dr. Carter, welcome. Was this, you had 4 proposers, is that what you mentioned?
As part of the preliminary utility audit, the A&M system had negotiated contracts with 4 providers for us to be able to bring them in to give us a presentation to look just quick glance at what our issues were, and then to provide proposals.
And just out of curiosity, was this the lowest priced? I mean, I know you didn't select on lowest price, but were the prices fairly competitive?
They were fairly competitive, but they looked at a variety of things, and Amoresco's proposal was more comprehensive and met the needs.
Okay, and one last question. Was there, did Amoresco provide a hub plan, or is there some kind of hub plan as a part of this for historically underutilized businesses?
Yes, that was part of their plan, is that they had to submit the hub subcontracting. Again, can turn it over to Mr. McCord, who can address that.
Great,
in more
thank you.
detail.
Dr. Carter, I've got a question for you, please. You've got a variance of the amount from 10 million to 20 million. It's almost 100% more than base amount. What's the reason for it? Why from 10 million to 20 million?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow the question.
You're saying you're going to spend more than 10 million and less than 20 million.
Mr. Anwar, I think that might refer to our delegation levels, that if projects are between those ranges, that's when it comes to the CAAP committee, if you're looking at the matrix related to
Yes.
the project. So basically, they can tell you more specifically what the cost of their project, but it falls into that range. So
Okay.
perhaps we weren't clear in explaining that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I had this project, I had this property, and I looked at a solar system, and, you know, it would require expenditure of cash, and it was a 15-year payout. And I just said, I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's too, I mean, I could take the cash and invest it somewhere else more effectively. So it sounds like what's driving this are those bonds. So you have to, is it because you have these energy-saving features in what is really otherwise a capital improvement project, you get to qualify for these bonds that are somehow subsidized for somebody, and the interest rate is low. In other words, we dealt with this, I guess, with A&M Corpus Christi. It's kind of like, well, yeah, but don't you have another better place to use the money than this? Except it sounds like it's driven by the bonds. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the bonds are driving, I think, the appetite to make it attractive to extend the financing term to include some of the longer payback items. I would say the difference in the comparison to a solar project is that in solar, you're looking strictly at a payback to offset your current electricity cost. Whereas in this case, if we don't do these projects, the institution is still going to be spending the same amount of money because they're going to have higher utility bills. So it's really that reduction in utility bills that occurs that enables it. And that's what makes it attractive in combination with the lower interest rate.
So anyway, you would, the money that you would pay in interest, basically amortizing those bonds and paying those bonds back, you don't have anything other to do with that money. In other words, it's a better use. That's my question. In other words, it sounds like because you're able to kind of throw in some other needed projects under the kind of category of this sort of energy savings deal, you get sort of bang for the buck that's just not just energy savings. Is that fair?
Yes, it allows them to leverage energy savings to tackle deferred maintenance items. So things that they would be replacing out of their capital budget anyway, such as the cooling towers that Dr. Carter mentioned and improved security lighting on campus. Yes, sir.
Mr. McCord, this is a big item. Can you just briefly tell the audience, just in few words, what you're trying to do to have energy savings?
Yes, sir. We have 8 general energy conservation measures. So we're replacing interior lighting throughout 31 facilities on campus with LEDs. We're replacing exterior lighting and pathway lighting throughout the campus, which not only will be more efficient LEDs, but we're also increasing light levels, which was a concern for the safety of the students on campus and a big driver with the executive management team. We are doing central plant optimization. The central plant with the chillers, cooling towers, and boilers are really the largest energy consumers on campus, so we're optimizing all of that equipment. And then the balance within the facilities themselves, apart from lighting, is adding more efficient pumps and motors and variable frequency drives to control that.
Thank you, Mr. McCord. I've got a hanger. I would change everything to LED. It's a lot of saving, believe me or not. Initial cost is a little bit higher, but over the long term, you save a lot of money.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, thank you, Dr. Carter and Mr. McCord, for being here. Dr. Carter, please relay to your leadership, your president, the great work that y'all are doing at Prairie View A&M, and keep that up. Y'all are doing very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, I need a motion and a second, please.
Make the motion.
I second.
Motion passed. We move on to agenda item 5G. This was on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5H and 5I were added to the consent calendar. Me to 5J. 5J is an interim report of Financial Literacy Advisory Committee activities. This committee co-chair Laura Ewing and Jared Pickens will provide an update giving a general overview of the work that committee has accomplished so far. Laura Ewing and Jared Pickens and Dr. Charles Pearls, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Student Financial Aid Programs, will be available for questioning. The item is only for information, please.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Dr. Charles Pulse, Deputy Assistant Commissioner, and I've been working with the Financial Literacy Advisory Committee since it convened. I just want to give you a brief overview before turning it over to Jared and Laura. One of the many activities underway to support the 60 by 30 Tech Strategic Plan is the Financial Literacy Advisory Committee. The committee is halfway through its year-long effort, and I'm joined today by the committee's co-chairs, Laura Ewing and Jared Pickens, to provide you with interim observations from the committee to gather your feedback. The committee was focused on promoting a better understanding on how and why to pay for higher education. It consists of 24 leaders representing student financial aid, higher education, K-12 education, community-based organizations, and the business and finance sector, a list of which is in the supplemental handout that was provided to you. We've been fortunate to hear from a variety of individuals regarding factors that impact this understanding of how and why to pay for higher education. The complete list is on your handout, and I've highlighted a few here on the screen representing the range of individuals who have spoken to us. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to our co-chairs to present initial observations and our next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Pulse. I really, really appreciate it. First of all, before we begin, we know your time is very precious, so we'll stick to our time. But we'd like to thank Dr. Pulse for his guidance thus far. The committee has truly benefited from the direction. I think I speak for Ms. Ewing and myself that it's been an honor to work with the 21 brilliant people that have been put together, and we've put a lot of work in, and we really look forward to your recommendations today and in the future. So thanks again for listening to us today. The first goal we're going to look at 3 goals today. I'll handle the first 2, and then my co-chair, Laura Ewing, will handle the third one. If you look at the draft here, draft goal number 1, I think the important item there to understand is it is a draft, and this is a work in progress, and we're trying to change something that hasn't been changed or done in a while. So the first thing I'd like for you to look at is 2 words in draft goal number 1, and that is curriculum and timing. As an educator myself, I understand that those 2 words, curriculum and timing, are very, very important all the way from the elementary level to the middle school level, high school, and then post-secondary. When we're looking at these items, and you have the handouts as well, what we're looking at doing here is curriculum includes primarily middle school, high school, and post-secondary education. So that's what I'm talking about right here. And timing relates to the students thinking about higher education ahead much earlier in their academic career. We understand, and I think many of you understand, the more times you're told about higher education and looking at your career and things of that nature, the more it stays in our mind, and the more thinking with an end in mind, we want that much earlier in the process. So how do we accomplish this? Well, the committee believes that a key time to introduce how to pay for higher education and why higher education is towards the, and we've already discussed it a little bit today, and that's that endorsement selection process starting in the middle school time period. And what we'd like to do, what the committee is discussing right now in that process is it's probably very important that in that endorsement selection process that the discussion of how to pay for higher education towards our 60 by 30 mission, should be done at that point. In addition to that, the parental involvement should be done at that point as well, and some type of document signing off from the parents and the students showing that discussion has taken place with counselors and the parents themselves.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
What is an endorsement selection process?
Very good question. So we talked about it earlier today, and basically it's just saying, it's regarding to House Bill 5, and basically it's just saying that they're going to choose a certain track rather than opt-in, opt-out, that type of thing. So that's what we're talking about. At that time, we would like this discussion to go a little bit further into how do we pay for college, and get it in their mind.
And that happens in middle school, this endorsement or the opt-in, opt-out?
Yes, sir, right. Well, no, sir. The endorsement selection of what they want to study and their focus and path happens prior to attending high school.
Can I add something real fast?
Absolutely, please.
The 5 endorsements are STEM, business and industry, public services, which includes medicine to public service in many different ways, arts and humanities, and a multidisciplinary approach. Those are the 5 endorsements, and those are the pathways that the students are able to choose at the middle school level, and that the school districts are working with them and understanding what those pathways are and how, what are their aptitudes so that they can move forward with that. And so what we are recommending is that we tap into that time period so that they're looking at what is available to them and what are their goals financially, what are their needs financially, to be able to go further with education.
Okay.
And, we believe it starts probably before that in elementary school, but we're really focusing right there in the middle school. We think that's a good time to get it going in the students' minds and the parents' mind, as well. Now, the second thing we're looking at, I told you about timing and sequence. We're going to talk about timing and sequence real quick. Oops, my bad. Timing and sequence in terms of high school curriculum. For many of us, and the great thing about our team is that we have a couple of high school principals on our team. So they're really able to come in and tell us what is happening with students, what are they learning, and what are they seeing. Right now in the state of Texas, a personal financial literacy course is required to be offered, but it's not required to be taken. So being offered does not necessarily mean the class makes, correct? If there's not enough students, then why do the class? So what we're looking at and working with also a representative from the TEA, it's also part of our team, is that we'd like to look at something where we make the personal finance course adjusted and also required. We know that's barriers on that, but we think it's very, very important that at the freshman and sophomore year, that again, after they've made this endorsement selection, that they're coming in, and at that point, they're truly learning about how do we finance college and also other financial literacy things. Retention's a big deal in college. And so we would also be adjusting that course a little bit, but still keeping in some of those basic financial literacy principles. So that's one of the recommendations there. Finally, so that kind of wraps up high school. So let's go into college real quick.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Absolutely, please do.
When you discuss this with students, do you also cover expected lifetime earnings for various pathways?
So the TEKs are out there. I'm not an expert exactly what are on there in terms of the curriculum. We did look that up in one of our committees. It is very broad. So I believe that one thing we would want to hit on in that class, again, I show my students this in college, is the potential difference between earning a certificate versus an associate's degree versus bachelor's, master's, et cetera. So I would imagine that that's in there, but that's something that we could make sure is added.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the fun things about Jared and I serving as committee co-chairs is he is at the collegiate level, and I was a K to 12 educator and curriculum coordinator. And so we've been able to tag team on some things. As of several legislative sessions ago, our K through 8th grade students are to take in their math classes about financial literacy. And in the 7th and 8th grade year, because we wrote the standards, when I was a president of Texas Council on Economic Ed, we wrote the standards, and so I'm very familiar with them, and they were approved by the state board. What that involves at the 7th and 8th grade, they are beginning to look at going to college, higher education, what does it cost? So those things are implanted in the 7th and 8th grade. Okay, and then at the exit level, at the high school senior course, which is a one-semester course on economics, they are to also learn how to complete the FAFSA, how to pay for college. But it's a one-semester course as they're exiting high school. So that one-semester course that is an elective right now that Jared has talked about is what we're suggesting would really be good to require it of all students, because they have K-8 financial literacy, some of which is geared directly towards college and higher education. And then also, they have this exit level at the senior level with economics. But during those freshman, sophomore years, as they're having many economic decisions coming upon them, so that would be a good avenue to require that. We're suggesting to require that course of all of our students.
And the thing I failed to mention here is if we think about our senior year, it's sometimes for many of us kind of hard to remember our senior year. And that's typically when students take their high school economics course. We're teaching micro, macro, and a little bit of financial literacy in that class. So the amount of financial literacy I would imagine is slim with everything that's having to be taught. And also think about your mindset your senior year, fixing to get out of school. While a lot of our principals say that the students, it just may not be a good time to learn those items at that point. They're thinking ahead.
May I ask, I'm sorry, just one more quick question from Ms. Ewing regarding the endorsements. If I remember correctly, only one of the endorsement paths has the extra math and science or an extra math and science at the end. Would choosing the endorsement affect your career and college readiness, and would choosing the endorsement affect, if I remember correctly, eligibility for the top 10% rule?
That is not in my level of expertise, so I would avoid answering that. I would need somebody else to answer that. Okay, thanks.
So in staying on time real quick, I'm going to move. Anything else on Goal 1 questions? I think you can see sequence, timing, curriculum is really the focus there. Goal 2, we're looking at kind of the infrastructure side. So we want to ensure guidance, resources that are simple, effective, actionable, and understandable, okay? And I know that that's kind of a basic thing when we think about how we want to market to individuals, but we had a doctoral student from the University of Texas at Austin that came in and really opened up our eyes that many websites out there, admissions for different universities, are at a much higher reading level than they absolutely need to be. So one thing we want to focus on in terms of our resources and how we promote our future programming is that we work in a way where we're reaching our audience at their readability level. And that was very insightful for us. So our goal really here is branding. How do we brand this? And how do we give guidance and resources not only to students, but bringing their parents in. The parent involvement is very important. So we also want to look at, creating the standardized content that is universally recognized and referenced, okay? And so finally, that's more of a programming resources item that can be with counselors, teachers, and parents. And then finally, the thing that we would also like to talk about is if we're going to require some courses, such as personal financial literacy, we think that every teacher in the high school level, the overall goal for many of those teachers is to see their students be successful and move on in the future. Having them all have some type of CPE and training in regards to understanding financial literacy education would be a positive thing. So having that, we're recommending that they take those types of CPE, which I say continuing education for our educators, would be positive in terms of them having the resources, whether it's English, whether it's history, whatever it is, being able to incorporate those items in their classes as well. And so is there any questions on Goal 2? If not, I'll turn it over to Laura to finish up with Goal 3.
So what you see are some very strong basics and goals for levels 1, or goals 1 and 2, and then now we move into Goal 3. And one of the things is that we oftentimes, with goals 1 and 2, they're very, very important, but we can also say, now go forth and multiply. We want more students being successful in graduation, and we also want them to incur less debt. Those are our goals, overarching goals, and why we have worked towards how do we help our students be successful with those. But at the third goal, what I appreciate about this is that it's really saying we're not just going to send you forth alone, that we realize that to make this all successful, there needs to continue to be a support system that is there, and that there are resources that are still available. So if you look at Goal 3, it says to leverage the resources of schools, institutions of higher education, foundations, associations, businesses, government agencies, and other key stakeholders to support post-secondary financing, curriculum, and advising. And then we look at the strategies under that, and we would recommend, or we are asking to recommend, is to increase the staffing of the Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Texas Education Agency, and the Texas Workforce Commission, so that we are actually working with the teachers, the students, the parents, the community out there, so that these goals can be met and that they are understanding what their roles are and what is available that is there. Another very strong strategy is to require post-secondary institutions to provide annual reporting on how their students are doing, so that there is that continued support through the universities, through the campuses, to help the students continue with their goal to graduate, but to also not be greatly in debt. So that is an additional strategy or an additional set of goal to help support in the future, and not just, okay, we've done all these things, now we are done. So going to the next one, to the next statement, and that is what we ask of you, obviously, is we need feedback and we need guidance to take back to the committee. We have met for the first half of our time together, and what we want to do is take back what you say to us, taking your feedback to the meeting, which will take place in a couple of weeks, to the next meeting. And then we will continue to work based on what your feedback is and what our understandings are from this meeting to refine the goals, the objectives, and the strategies. And we want to suggest tools that will help support these strategies. And one of the things that I think really surprises, well, to step back for a minute, you have a list of the different speakers, and thank you very much to Chad. He brought in really strong speakers for us all to understand what's out there, what the needs are, et cetera. And one of the things that really hit us was that readability for students trying to fill out the paperwork to go on for college and the university level oftentimes is way above their reading ability. And so even understanding those things, how do we help to conquer that to help our students be successful in moving towards their goals? So we want to work towards those tools. And then we want to define the core concepts of financial literacy as related to financing post-secondary education. So that's where we will go for the next time period, and our goal is to be through by November so that we can come and report in December to you with the final plan and get approval or see if there need to be additional changes. Very good.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Jared Pickens, Ms. Laura Ewing, and Dr. Charles Pulse. One thing I learned last week, I was with the Koch brothers seminar, in one of the schools that one of the speakers said, when the students in third grade, you have to enforce college, college, and college. Anyway, thank you very much. This is an item for information only. We move on to the agenda item. Excuse me. 5K1. This item is for information only. 5K1 is a discussion and amendment of Chapter 22, Subchapter B, Section 22.23, 22.24, 22.25, and 22.29 of Coordinating Board Rules concerning provision for tuition equalization grant, TEG, program to be heard for adoption by the board in July. It is not possible to have 30-day comment period before June meeting of the Committee on Affordability and Accounting and Planning and adoption of these rules changes is necessary in advance of the start of the fall semester. Dr. Charles W. Pulse, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid Program, will be available to answer any questions.
I'm basically here if you have any questions as to why we're altering the timeline.
Anybody? Why you're on train? I just want to know myself.
It comes down to the fact that items weren't signed by the governor in time for the 30-day comment periods to occur, and we need to make sure that these rules are in place so that institutions can act on these things for this fall semester.
Thank you. This was, I was worried why. Anyway, thanks. We move on to agenda item 5K2 is on the consent calendar. So therefore, we move on to the last item, and that's the one I like the most, is the adjournment. I need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
It's approved. Thank you.
Okay, we need a couple of minutes before the special board meeting for them to do some technical stuff. So if you'd like to take a short break.
What is that short break? 5 minutes?